Obviously, the Stanley Cup Finals are just about upon us, but we still have a couple more games to decide who's going to take the Western Conference Finals, while the Eastern Conference Finals has already been decided. What could each of the two potential Stanley Cup Finals scenarios look like? We'll dive into that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, friends, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. You should go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL, and when you enter promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every single order. Now, tonight's episode, obviously, we're going to dive into and talk about the upcoming Stanley Cup Finals. Right now, it's still not entirely decided. This evening, though, we do have a game at 8 p.m. Eastern. Obviously, this is a critical one for the Dallas Stars as they continue to fight for their season. It has not been a great playoff run against the Vegas Knights, right? This team has somehow, again, we know that the Knights have summoned their devil magic or something, and somehow, once again, they stand on the precipice of a Stanley Cup Finals appearance, yet again. Meanwhile, the Jets still have yet to have one, so what a painful sequence of events. Already, today has been a very rough sports day for me, having watched Borussia Dortmund fall to Bayern once again, so watching the Vegas Golden Knights go on to the Stanley Cup Finals, if they see off Dallas this evening, is just like a double gut punch, man. You hate to see it. It's really frustrating, and it feels like once again the Jets got beat on the way to Vegas's next Stanley Cup Finals appearance. How does this keep happening to us, man? It's always like the past couple of runs where Vegas has actually made it. This will be their second trip. They've had to beat the Jets along the way. Is like Winnipeg some sort of a barometer? Are we like a milestone that Stanley Cup Finals teams have to beat? Remember Montreal did it too, right? So just a really bizarre sequence of events. We always lose to teams that are like the either the winners or the just about runners up. So maybe at some point the Jets can actually confer that into a Stanley Cup Finals appearance themselves. Probably not, but it's nice to dream once in a while. Now, like I said, Dallas is really desperately trying to hold on here. Pavelski is finally starting to, see some life. Jason Robertson is getting active again. But Vegas has just seemingly had the answer in so many of these games. A couple of really big overtime wins, some really opportunistic scoring in front of goal off of turnovers, a couple of nasty giveaways here and there that got converted. So Dallas really has to be clean, especially because Game 5 is on the road. This is a very tough ask to come away with a victory, but Dallas was able to squeeze out at least one. Maybe they can start the road back and complete the reverse sweep. Now, if it does get to be a Stanley Cup Finals of, the Florida Panthers versus Vegas, for me, I would say Vegas is definitely favored. I think one of the issues for them is that, despite being and playing better hockey recently and maybe even being the better, more cohesive team, in net, there's no question that Adin Hill is not on the same level as Sergei Bobrovsky, which is not a sentence you would have heard a few years ago. But Bobrovsky, this playoff run has been immaculate. He has kind of been one of the biggest reasons the Panthers have advanced this far. And if that sounds familiar to you, especially with the Paul Maurice team, guess who used to do that for him with the Jets? Connor Hellebuck. This time, though, Bobrovsky has channeled his best version of himself to the point where, the Panthers have been getting outplayed in a lot of their games, but it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, they're conceding less than their opponents, and that is pretty much all you need to get through. I know it sounds very stupid and a little bit cliche, but I think Bobrovsky has really been a massive difference maker, and again, kind of highlights the need for why, I think Hellebuyck will be super in demand this offseason. Teams are going to realize that he could be maybe that next level push, that last piece to really complete the infinity gauntlet of your Stanley Cup contender. Now, you might look at his playoff performance and say, well, are we really interested in trading for that? But I promise you, Hellebuyck on another team will probably rebound, especially if he actually has a backup who can at least eat a few extra starts and give Helly a little more rest. But a series with Vegas and Dallas will be very not Vegas and Dallas, apologies. Vegas and Florida will probably be pretty fast. I'd expect Vegas to hit back on a lot of counters. That might push the Panthers to the brink. Hard to say because Florida is already facing a lot of really difficult opponents, and thus far they've managed to avoid breaking despite bending a lot. But maybe this is the time when that sort of philosophy doesn't really hold up, and they eventually do snap. Now, the Panthers have actually had a lot more rest than both Dallas and Vegas. They have, obviously swept the Canes. So they've had some time to collect themselves, have a few extra days off, and that can be tough, right? On the one hand, rest is good. It helps you repair your body. You'll be fresher for the next series. But on the other hand, you might get a little bit rusty. You might find yourself a little bit slow out of the gates versus a team that has been fighting and scrapping every step of the way. But first, before we even get to that point, Vegas has to see the series out against Dallas. And the Stars might actually be capable of doing the reverse sweep. I mean, the Stars team has been persistent all year. What's one more big reversal of fortunes here late in the series? We'll have to wait until tonight to see if Dallas extends its fate or if, unfortunately they fall short of ousting the Knights once again. But we'll dive into the other possible scenario, which is Florida versus Dallas, should the Stars advance, in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Birddogs. If you've heard of Birddogs before, you know that they are one of the only pants out there that's got an interior liner. A lot of you probably have lots of boxer briefs and stuff, especially all of you male listeners. And, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have some pants that actually kind of have built-in underwear. If you had that, you could save space and money, and who doesn't love doing that? Most importantly, though, you might be wondering, well, why is Birddog special aside from the liner? You'll get a great pair of pants that fits you just right. It's comfy and it's versatile for all situations. They've got plenty of styles for everything from the golf pitch to, going out shopping with some friends or maybe even hitting the bars. Birddogs are perfect for every occasion. They come in many great shapes and sizes. And when you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and enter promo code LockedOnNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. You really can't go wrong with any of their pants. I highly recommend them, and plenty of famous folks out there have given Birddogs a shot, and they love theirs. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOn right now and place your order. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you for rejoining us once again for thoughts on the playoffs and two potential Stanley Cup Finals scenarios. Obviously, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but we are getting close. It's getting to that point where we're starting to think about it a little bit more. And whether you like the Vegas Golden Knights or not, or the Dallas Stars, one of these two teams has to advance, and I would prefer it personally to be the Dallas Stars. If the Stars advance, this is a very interesting series because Jake Ottinger has shown at times that he can be a world-class goalie. He's been a little bit uneven at times against Vegas, but I feel like, with this Panthers team, he could maybe restore a little bit of that form and kind of equal what Bobrovsky is capable of. Now, Bob, again, has been almost unbeatable, and I think that is a very tough scenario for the Dallas Stars if they were to advance. But obviously, Dallas first has to win 3 more games, and that is not exactly the world's easiest task when you can't afford a single extra loss. So, for Dallas, even if they advance, I think it would be very difficult to get past Bobrovsky. I know that the Stars team is deep and that it's quality and that they have great matchup options in their, depth lines and stuff. And defensively, they're a pretty strong outfit. But I just feel like, something about the Panthers this year feels like they might goalie their way all the way to a cup. And that's on top of having a very deep, talented roster that, despite getting outplayed at times, still has the scoring touch and finesse to really get past any opponent. Just like at Barkov, Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk, they've all been on a mad tear recently. They're all phenomenal players. And I think for a team like the Stars, who have had to really fight their way through this series against a strong Knights team, it might just be a little bit too much to get past Florida. But it's not like this is a particularly locked, sealed, and shut kind of series. Everyone said the Boston Bruins were the team to beat in the playoffs, and they lost in the first round. So, predictions are just that. You never know how things are going to play out on the ice, and there is a chance that perhaps Dallas can advance past Vegas and maybe even beat the Florida Panthers, which I don't know how you'd feel about that. I personally wouldn't mind that. A Stars Cup would probably be pretty decent. I suppose it's better than seeing Paul Maurice hoisting it. I'm kidding mostly. If Maurice were to win it, I'd be fine with that. Congrats to him. I'm trying not to hold any bitter feelings from the last few years of Maurice's tenure because he had some really good years for the Jets. The first 3 or 4 years of his coaching career with Winnipeg, they were actually pretty decent seasons. But unfortunately, the end of his career is what all of us will most likely remember. So, yeah. If he wins a cup with the Panthers, I'm sure we will never hear the end of it. But maybe it doesn't work out, and maybe Dallas or Vegas ends up claiming the trophy first. But like I said, I'm personally pulling for Dallas. I think they're the more fun pick, and between the teams that I find the least obnoxious, the Stars are reasonably up there, I guess. I don't know. It's not a very particularly happy set of selections for me, but maybe Dallas is the team that I would root for. Let me know who you're bandwagoning for the Stanley Cup Finals, and give your series predictions below for each of those scenarios that I've outlined. I guess the last thing I'll say about the playoffs this year is that I just haven't really felt all that connected to it. Ever since the Jets got knocked out, it's just kind of been, fun at times to check in on, but I feel like my love affair with the NHL playoffs over the past few seasons has really declined, in part because the Jets really haven't been big participants, but also something about it just seemingly has lost a little bit of the shine. So this year's playoffs, I think, is a really good opportunity for a team from a non-traditional market to really rise up and steal the crown. It's kind of why I'd prefer Vegas not to win. I think it'd be better if a team from, say, the Panthers area or Dallas kind of takes it first. Not that Vegas winning is necessarily the worst thing, but I just think those fan bases have had a lot more to wait for. Vegas is still a nascent team, and hockey winning in the South is objectively good for the league and probably good for the fans overall, even if the fans might not always agree. But hockey in the very far South succeeding shows that those markets can really support it and that they can thrive. And I think it'd be a really good thing to help continue to establish more teams and roots down there. It does seem like Houston is one of the next destinations for the NHL. So a little bit of a Houston-Dallas rivalry would certainly be pretty fun. We've already seen the Houston Texans and Dallas Cowboys go at it. What is one more set of rival, Texas teams, right? We all love that interstate, all right, is it I guess intrastate conflict as we, or is it interstate? God, I can't even remember. I always get mixed up with those, but whatever one is basically the in-state competition and rivalry, I think we would love to see one more for Texas. Now, in just a little bit, I want to close out tonight's episode with some quick thoughts on how Winnipeg should honestly approach this offseason and what I'm expecting them to do. We'll dive into that in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. If you've ever heard me talk about FanDuel, it's a big favorite of mine because it's very easy, very convenient, and safe and secure. And best of all, you can in fact get paid instantly. A lot of you are probably casting bets on not only the NBA playoffs, but maybe even the NHL playoffs. And FanDuel supports both. That's why they are the number one sportsbook in America. There really is no better place to place your bets for all of the playoff action you can handle than FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us on these final thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets. Just wrapping up really quickly with some quick thoughts on stuff that I hope the Jets do this offseason and stuff that I expect them to do. My big hope is that Winnipeg really goes for a culture change. That's kind of the thing that I think, for me, has been an issue with this team over the years. A lack of accountability, players not always owning up to the mistakes. Same with the coaching staff. And there just seems to be a lack of clarity and vision from the upper ranks, which is a shame because the Jets, for a while, really seemed like they were on the up and up. But, recently, past few years, we've kind of dawdled a bit, hit a patch of stagnancy. And the Jets financially don't seem to be doing that well. So, the threats of relocation and stuff, it doesn't make me feel great. Unfortunately, for as much as I'd like all of that to happen, I expect the Jets to not really change much internally. All of the players saying that they were generally happy with the room and seemingly in good spirits makes me think that, the culture change that really needs to happen probably won't. I think it was especially frustrating to see Bones walk back his comments about the room after he kind of lit into the team post-game, post-game 5. Look, I think the reality is when you are stressed out and angry and emotional, you tend to lash out and say things. But I think Bones had been keeping a lot of that to himself for a while, and it's stuff that he's noticed over the last several months. And so I don't think that he's necessarily wrong in his assessment. I don't know that it necessarily solved anything for him to go through all of that process, but I do think it does show that internally, at least, there is acknowledgement that the team is not really meeting expectations. Whether the players accept that, version of things, I don't know. Based on their explanations and comments, I get the sense that they still don't really agree with Bones' assessment, but as a fan and an outsider watching this team continually struggle up the hill, I think Rick is probably more on target than we'd like him to be. I would love for him to be wrong, because it means you don't have these issues, but unfortunately it just doesn't really feel like that. So, tough call, but I would also hope that the Jets look at all of this and start thinking about the future rather than the present. I think Winnipeg's present is just not very good. For as decent as the Jets could be at times this year, we also saw what happens when even one or two players gets injured. It's pretty ugly. This team really doesn't have the depth to survive more than one injury to a serious player, like a major starter or something, especially in the top 6 or in the top 4 defensive pairings. And to be fair, most teams really would struggle as well. But I think with the Jets in particular, because our team was designed to have, a couple of grinding forechecking lines and only 2 really big scoring lines, I feel like even one injury was very noticeable. And it's not like a fully healthy Jets team was lighting opponents up left and right either. The whole team had finishing issues this year, barring a couple of really big exceptions with a few players. So overall, bit of a mixed bag. As much as I'd like the Jets to start preparing for the future, though, I do suspect that they're going to try and make one more run this year. And the only way that they'll sell players off is if they find themselves out of a playoff spot by the trade deadline. And it would probably have to be by a pretty fair and significant margin for them to feel comfortable with jettisoning the season and just kind of calling it quits, because we all know that Winnipeg loves playoff revenue, and they will not hesitate to push for a playoff spot if they feel that is within reach. So a lot for the Jets to process. Let me know if you think the Jets really should be ambitious this season and potentially tear things down, or if you feel that maintaining the status quo and trying to be as competitive as possible is the best option. Drop your thoughts below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that is all the time that we have. Thanks so much for listening and making us your first listen of the day. As always, have a great night and go Jets go.